for instance, when we're talking two different buckets of money. But yeah, so every year that I've been there, they've tried to lower the unemployment benefits. And I definitely don't support that. I don't know if any of you have tried to get a job recently, but sometimes it takes a while. And sometimes it takes a while to find a job that pays you what you're worth and what you need to survive. And when we talk really about unemployment, the folks who utilize that more than anyone in our state are folks in the construction industry. Or in trades that are not working in the off season. And so they build up hours, and then your unemployment is based on what you were making, and like it's a system, it's not like just a blank check that folks get, it's based on hours and whatnot. And so what you'll see in that industry is folks working for a big chunk of the year. Obviously they save up money, but then there is a section where they actually cannot work, and so then the unemployment money that they paid into this trust and their employers pay into then goes back to those employees. And so no, I always will vote no on anything that lowers the amount of unemployment that folks are able to get.
Any questions for our guest speaker?
With the rise of political extremism across the country, we're finding, especially from January 6th, and a lot of political extremists come from our state. Are legislators doing anything to curb that?
No. I mean, no, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They're not. And it's scary. And I think that all of you should be nervous about it. I mean, I know I am. And not just for my own safety, but for the sake of our democracy. You know, every year that I've been in Jefferson City, I've been there 6 years now, it has gotten worse and worse. There are folks on the other side of the aisle that I would consider friends that I work with, that we work well together. But there are also folks who I am scared to talk to. And that should not be the state of our government. It should not be a situation where there's an evacuation plan for me to get out of my workplace, right? But there is. And it's concerning. To your point, are we doing anything about it? No.
I got a hard question for you. Kayla Campbell from another class asks if you could magically pass one thing. What would it be and why?
Wow, that's a great question. So for a very long time, it was Medicaid expansion. That was, for me, the most important thing that we could do in our state. Providing folks access to health care, but we were able to do that, and we were able to fully fund it last year, which was extremely important to me. Oh gosh, that is a very hard question. I think I would say, this is gonna be a broad answer, and I don't like it, because everything is so intersectional and everything impacts everything else. And so my answer is going to be with a caveat that everything that would need to make this happen underneath it and infrastructure building would be done as well, and that would be healthcare for everyone. I say that with that caveat because it's not a thing that we could just do overnight and say free healthcare for all. That's not a thing I support. It would have to be an incremental thing that we would build, and there would have to be a lot of work done to be able to make that successful. But I do believe that healthcare access is the most important thing to the success of humans.
Any questions?
About the corruption that you mentioned from the marijuana, have you seen any corruption firsthand? You don't have to name any names specifically. But.
So corruption is kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? I will say that I have seen things happen where folks maybe vote on something that benefits them that they shouldn't have voted on, where I have seen decisions made that benefit friends of people or who you know, that type of stuff. Yes, absolutely.
So I'm a foster kid, and I was wondering if there are any plans or anything like that that might be happening in the future, or anything really for foster kids, because foster kids are just kind of looked over. There's not enough homes, there's not enough funding. So many foster kids are basically just ended up being left on the streets. There's like all the programs for foster kids are being underfunded and undercut. I think all across Missouri, the Christmas thing, there was only $100 going towards each foster kid. That includes like little kids up to all the way to teenagers. Just most of the funding programs and just foster care itself is just kind of, the awareness isn't there, and the funding just isn't there at all. There's not enough state workers or anything. And the state workers are being underpaid, and they're working 50 cases at once.
I want to piggyback on Keegan because Levi Marshall had a very similar question. With the Springfield area having a substantial amount of children in foster care, many who are neglected, this is Levi's voice, and those living below the radar who frequently slip through the proverbial crack, have you proposed any ideas or looked at other states in an effort to repair this broken system?
I appreciate those questions a lot. As a former social worker, this is one of the areas that I spend a lot of my time in. And to answer your question, yes, but not enough, right? We know that. So in the last 2 years, and you know this obviously, in the last 2 years, the state of Missouri has lost over 200 children's division workers because they keep quitting, because they can't survive in the structure that we've created for them. And with that, it impacts everything else when you don't have caseworkers who stay. You have a harder time finding foster parents, you have a harder time keeping foster parents. We're not doing enough on that side of things to make sure that we are recruiting the right people and giving them the right training and enough money to protect our kids on that side of the conversation. And then there is a whole lot within the foster care rights conversation of the children themselves. Some of the things that I do think we're getting a lot of headway on. Overall, obviously, money is one of the most important things. Instead of doing that giant tax cut that cost several $billions, I would have liked to have gone to children's division, so we're actually investing in our kids. So money would be a huge part of it, is just fully funding the things that currently exist, which we're not doing. But there are a lot of things that there are conversations around right now that I am hopeful about. One of the big ones, when you turn 18 in Missouri in our foster care system, you completely lose all support structure the moment you turn 18. We've seen other states do things where I say 18, there are some provisions that go up to 21 depending on what your case is.
There's actually a lot of ones that go up to 21, I've been one of them.
Awesome. We've seen other states do vast expansion of that, and especially in the housing side of things, and making sure that our foster kiddos are getting into housing and finding places to rent and building up that credit. And I think that expansion of those types of services are extremely important, especially when we don't have enough foster homes and we have a lot of kids who are aging out of the system, is what it's called. We need to be supporting them all the way into adulthood and making sure they have what they need. So I think that there's conversation around expanding some of those programs that currently exist, which I think would be great. There's also been some stuff on the foster parent side of things, of doing additional tax credits and additional funding for them. Our current Speaker of the House, that was a big priority for him, and so we were able to pass something this past year that was an increase in what they can claim on their taxes and to do some recruitment around that. Then there's also some stuff happening on the side of things of holding especially residential care facilities more accountable for the care of our kids. We have you may have seen a lot of stuff in the news. Agape is one of the big ones that you may have heard that name. But we have a lot of residential care facilities that are abusing our kids and they're not taking care of them. And so there is a bipartisan coalition going down that angle of things to make sure that we are trying to change those laws so that we can hold folks accountable. All that to say, Missouri is not the best state when it comes to protecting our kids. And that's not just in the foster care system, that's the whole Children's Division network with abuse and neglect hotlines. And as you said, we have caseworkers who are working triple, sometimes quadruple the caseloads that any individual should be doing, especially when compared to other states who are fully funding their programs.
There's independent state worker organizations that are separate from Children's Division now, just so the caseloads can even be handled.
And what's unfortunate about what he's saying, so one of the things that we do is we contract with businesses that are not state-owned or not state businesses, so they're not state employees, excuse me. We contract with them to bring in their social workers to take on some of the burden. We pay those contract workers more than we pay our state workers because we have to. That's how contracting works. And so I don't want to say wasting money, but in a sense, spending more money over here because we're refusing to invest in our own structure. And so then that even hurts the workers over here more because you see somebody getting paid more than you and they have fewer cases and their job's way better. So you're going to leave over here and go take a job over here. Of course, why wouldn't you? And so that system just continues to deteriorate, and it's a huge, huge problem.
A couple more questions for Madam Leader.
What's your thought on gun laws?
Good question. So Missouri has very lax gun laws. I am someone, listen, I grew up on a farm, and so I definitely understand the value of the Second Amendment and how it is important, and especially for a lot of folks' way of life. Like, you absolutely have to have access to guns. But I also think that the way our current laws are set up are not good, and that we need to do a lot of work around them. Several years ago, before I was a legislator, we rolled back a lot of our gun regulations in our state. And what was interesting about that is law enforcement actually came to Jefferson City and testified against the changes that we were making. And the police officers said, please don't do this. We don't want guns everywhere. We don't want access to all of these things, and they did it anyway. Some of the laws that are in our state that I think we really need to reevaluate. One is what is aptly named the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which was passed a few years ago. What that bill actually does, and again, law enforcement testified against this, it nullifies all federal gun law. So if there is a federal crime that happens with a gun, Springfield PD does the investigation, because that's usually how it works. The feds will contract it out essentially to our local guys. If the local guys now help out in any federal investigation with gun laws, they actually lose money. They can be sued for up to $25,000 per individual officer if they coordinate with the federal government on any of sort of their gun laws. So some of the gun laws that aren't here are the age restrictions or the magazines or purchasing of some things, or even transferring guns and stuff. If they violate federal law and our law enforcement helps with that, they actually lose funding. And so that's something that our law enforcement has very much come out against. You've actually, if you Google it, you can see some sheriffs and folks actually resigning because their jobs are so much harder now that they can't work with the feds. That's a really great example of something we've done in the past year that is extremely problematic.
Let's do one more question. Anybody else? Let's go, Keegan.
There's been a large increase from what I've seen in Springfield and a few other towns around us. There's been an increase of homelessness, car theft, home break-ins. The homeless population have been getting a lot more aggressive from what I've seen, because I personally know a lot of them. And things are just getting generally worse. What are your thoughts on that?
That's another one of those issues that I believe is really, there's a lot of layers to that discussion. There's obviously the mental health component, addiction component, there's lack of veteran support, so the list goes on and on of how we kind of got here. One of the biggest things that I think is really problematic for Springfield, especially right now in this exact moment, last legislative year, a bill passed called House Bill 1606, and that was an omnibus bill, which means there's 50 bills all rolled together into one, and this bill was many, many hundreds of pages long. And at the very last minute, there was an amendment added dealing with the homeless population thrown on. It was not a singular bill, it was not vetted, meaning we had no committee hearings, and it was thrown on. A lot of folks voted for the bill, not realizing that that language was on there. I fortunately was able to catch it beforehand, I voted no. But part of that provision adopted some stuff that Texas is trying to do with the homeless population. And this is one of those bills that I think had good intent with the way the language was written, and because we didn't do the proper vetting and take our time on it, is having really bad unintended consequences. But essentially what this bill says has to happen now is that our law enforcement officers have to go into any camping situation that is on any public or just out in a field or whatever, and dismantle the tent system that they have. And what they want to have happen is our municipalities, our cities, to buy parking lots and designate them as spaces for the homeless population to camp in. And so Greene County sheriffs have been going out and dismantling these tents that are on the north side of town, way past the highway. That's where a lot of folks are asleep, and then they come into the city to get resources, and then folks go back out. So what's been happening since about June is they're going in and they're tearing it all down, and if the folks don't leave, they're arresting them. There's a new criminal provision in here for camping, that now you can go to jail for camping. And so the tent city conversation is a whole separate can of worms, but there's a whole lot of concerns about just throwing a bunch of people in a parking lot with no support, no social workers or anyone to make sure that we're not selling drugs or prostituting children or any of the crazy things that could happen in a situation like that. And so now there's this criminal side of it that didn't exist before. And I will tell you, locally, the county folks are very much enforcing this bill.
I wonder that. I worked at 911 for a couple of years, and we would get calls from homeless people. help, they're sleeping on public property. Help, they're sleeping on private property. Like, where are they supposed to go? I don't fully understand that. And Tennessee just passed a law a year or so ago, maybe earlier this year, that criminalizes, literally, it's illegal to be homeless.
I mean, that's essentially
What does
our law is now.
what does that even mean? I don't fully understand.
And then it just continues to spiral, right? Because folks get arrested, they don't have money to pay the fines. Then they go, like, it just is a terrible system.
Get a job. Well, I can't get a job because I have a criminal record.
Absolutely.
Anyways, that's my cross to bear. Sorry, I'll give you. We'll wrap up with this question.
And
Okay.
She also, she
Oh
is
yeah,
the
I'm
next
sorry.
one.
I don't have a yeah.
About that topic, I read somewhere that Springfield's like top 5 like worst college cities in terms of like safety of the city. And I'm not for sure how accurate that website is, but what are your thoughts about that? Is it something to do with fighting against homelessness?
I definitely think that's part of it for sure. I haven't read it, so I don't know exactly what it's referring to, but we are considered like a party city, right? Often with the downtown atmosphere and things that we have, and I know that over the years there have been cases and instances of parties gone wrong, and the university, I feel like, has really done a good job of cracking down on that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's crime in Springfield in Southwest Missouri is huge. In my opinion, a lot of it goes back to poverty, and poverty and crime kind of go hand in hand. When folks can't afford to feed themselves or their kids, they get desperate, and when people are desperate, then there are consequences that are problematic. And so, for me, ultimately, crime, when the conversation of crime, and that's another topic that we can spend a lot of time on, but I think we need to be looking at it in various ways, not just from the criminal side of things and making sure that our law enforcement officers have what they need to be successful and that the laws match what they need, because there's a lot of them that don't, back to the gun conversation. But we also need to be looking at our support structures and what it means to get a job with $12 an hour wages or $11.15 where we're at right now. Like, all of those things combined produce the crime that we have, adding in then all the drug usage and all of that is connected.
I lied. Let's have one more question.
So I'm not entirely sure if this is true or not, but a friend of our family's that lives in Ozark and Nixa says that they passed some kind of law or bill that homeless people like in Ozark and Nixa aren't allowed to go out in the streets and ask for money, like to beg for money.
Yeah, so that would be a municipal passed thing at the city level. So Springfield actually did that. I don't know if we overturned that or not, but a couple years ago they passed a panhandling ban.
It's definitely not being enforced.
Yeah, it's not enforced, but yeah, so that you could get fined or picked up depending on the situation if you are panhandling. And so yeah, that's the thing that happens at the local level. I think there's a lot of problems with that, but
I think the only reason that was passed was because like I said, I've talked to multiple homeless people, and one of the things that comes up is I know a lot of homeless people that end up actually choosing to be homeless.
yeah.
And then they panhandle, and a lot of people find that as a morality issue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
And it's a safety issue too. For,
So you've been doing this for me for several years now, and I always love hosting you. First of all, round of applause. Thank you so much. If I am somebody who is interested in the stuff that you have said, or I want to reach out to you, communicate with you, because again, you are not just representing 132nd, you are representing your political party statewide. You're the minority leader. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I'm on all social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all the things. And then I have a website, crystalquade.com. And I do want to give a plug. If you guys are interested, obviously it's campaign season right now. There's a lot happening on the campaign side of things. If you want to learn more about that, you can reach out to any of the candidates who are running, or reach out to me and I can plug you in. If you're a Republican, I'm happy to plug you in with their side too. But we also do internships in Jefferson City. Which, as I mentioned, that's where I started. We have legislative interns who do research projects who will come up and just do various things depending on the legislator that you get plugged in with. And so I encourage you to consider that.
How much does it pay?
Well, it's not paid. I was going to say some universities, depending on where you go, will give you credit for that. Missouri State has a few professors that will do it. I don't think OTC has a program at this point. But that's always an opportunity if folks are interested in coming up to Jefferson City for a semester. So just keep that kind of in your back pocket.
We're chewing on it, service learning stuff at OTC, but that's down the road.
Okay.
All right, so once again, ma'am, thank you so much. We will